Zeke's twisted euthanasia plan to Eren's conspiracy to overthrow a government, Attack on Titan didn't just give us heroes or villains. It gave us desperate plans and ideologies born from fear, pain, and a different perspective of what it meant to truly save the world. But out of all these different plans I'm going to explain for you in today's video, at the end we'll try and figure out who was truly right, whose plan would not only have broken the cycle of violence, but may have actually saved Paradis Island from complete annihilation. The 50-year plan was for Paradis Island to run a small-scale test rumbling to show off its destructive potential, meant only as a warning and a way to scare off outside invaders, buying them around 50 years or so of peace before these enemies inevitably became more advanced and strong enough to overcome these titans with modernized weapons like airships or nukes. It was originally proposed by Zeke Yeager and was heavily backed by the Paradis higher-ups. So in this 50-year standstill, Paradis would build up its military, advance technology, and develop its infrastructure with the help and assistance of the Hizuru nation. Queen Historia would then have to inherit the Beast Titan from Zeke as soon as he reached the island, and would then have to bear as many royal-blooded children as humanly possible in her 13-year term. And if you think this is a bit messed up, trust me, it gets a lot worse. As in order to maintain the island's ability to activate the rumbling, you know, the only real leverage they have in this conflict, Historia and her children will have to carry on this cycle of passing on the Beast Titan and royal blood, essentially forcing them to kill each other in a cycle every 13 years. This would go on and on until the threat of the rumbling is made obsolete due to technology advancing over time. And don't worry, because if you're starting to think this plan is a bit deranged, Eren, the man who literally killed 80% of the world's population, thought the same, as he would also have to pass on the founding titan to selected candidates to ensure it remains safely in Paradis Island's hands. So the best case scenario is for Kiyomi Azumabito of the Hizuru nation to represent Paradis on the world stage, using her nation's influence to open diplomatic talks with Marley and the rest of the world to hopefully negotiate a peace deal within these 50 years. And worst case scenario, Paradis and the global alliance just develop weapons like nukes and the world just enters a standstill, similar to the likes of the Cold War. So on the surface, this plan seems pretty solid, as it avoids a lot of bloodshed and could seemingly secure the safety of the island. But unfortunately, as you start to look deeper and deeper, there are 4 underlying flaws that ultimately lead to this plan completely falling apart. First of all, the entire plan rests on the shoulders of the royal family. If anyone is captured or killed or anything disrupts the passing down of the founding titan, the island is screwed. Secondly, it would be a lot harder to negotiate a peace deal with other nations when you flaunt the threat of the rumbling, which essentially justifies the hatred and fear the outside world has for you in the first place, and would probably make the Eldians even more despised than they already are. And speaking of this, the power of titans would still exist, so they would have to force innocent children into a violent and cruel cycle to keep power on the island. So ultimately, the plan just fell apart, as every single person the plan relied on, like Historia or Eren, were extremely against it, only really pretending to go along with it. I mean, Zeke only really proposed this plan in the first place to hide his true intentions, simply as a step to carry out his true end goal, the dream of his idol Tom Sawyer. The euthanasia plan had one ultimate goal: to peacefully wipe out the subjects of Ymir by removing their ability to reproduce, ending the curse of the Titans permanently and stopping the cycle of violence and hatred towards the Eldian race. It was originally thought up by Tom Sawyer, and following his death was carried on by Zeke Yeager and his devout follower Yelena. However, it's important to note that Zeke bears no hatred towards the Eldians. He only seeks to stop them from having children to end the power of the Titans and the cycle of violence, as he thinks the suffering will never end if the Titan power still exists. The plan also included a small limited rumbling, with just enough power to destroy Marley's military bases and airship research, effectively removing the military capabilities from every single nation outside the island. This would hopefully allow the people of Paradis Island to safely live out the rest of their days without worrying about the threat of an invasion. And unlike the 50-year plan from before, this plan would actually fully eradicate the power of the Titans, ensure minimal casualties, and would allow for all the Eldians to live out the rest of their lives peacefully. So yeah, in theory, this sounds pretty great, right? It completely removes the cycle of hatred towards Eldians because, you know, they won't exist. But I think there's a lot of moral issues in this problem that have been kind of overlooked. So let's dig into Zeke's actual plan in carrying this out, which, to give props to him, is pretty genius. Pretty genius, if not for a few little liabilities which ultimately lead to his complete downfall. So, years prior to the events of Season 4, Zeke overheard Reiner say something which completely changed everything. Through his reports of the island, it was revealed that his brother Eren possessed the Founding Titan, and to activate such an ability, he would need to come into contact with a person of royal blood, as he did back in Season 2 with Zeke's late mother, Dinah Fritz. This laid out the initial foundations for Zeke's euthanasia plan, leading him to meet his brother Eren and Marley many years later. The two brothers went on to iron out the details of this plan, both understanding what it would take to pull off such an elaborate conspiracy. First, Yelena, a dedicated follower of Zeke, gathered her group of anti-Marleyan volunteers and infiltrated the Marley military, getting deliberately assigned to a survey ship, fully expecting it to be captured by Paradis forces. The ship's crew and all its contents were immediately seized and taken onto the island, including barrels and barrels of high-quality Marleyan wine, laced with the spinal fluid of none other than Zeke Yeager himself. So after infiltrating the island, the first stage of the plan was now complete. The volunteers then spent the next 3 years lobbying for their rights on the island, gradually gaining the trust of the military and higher-ups and getting themselves work placements in restaurants throughout the island. But why protest for 3 years just to get regular restaurant restaurant jobs. We'll all reveal that in due time, because during all this, Zeke was still over at Marley using the threat of the founder and its ability to start the rumbling at any given moment to amplify the threat of the island, convincing the Tiber family to declare war on Paradis, setting the stage for Eren's ambush and Eldian attack of Liberio. This skirmish served as the perfect cover to extract both Zeke and Eren, leaving Marley with no evidence of his betrayal, finally bringing the Jaeger brothers back to Paradis Island. But the hardest part of Zeke's plan had just begun, as both Eren and Zeke were imprisoned and separated as the higher-ups grew suspicious of their intentions. Because remember that 50-year plan I mentioned earlier? Well, the Paradis government was still dead set on following that, and would have to instantly surrender his beast titan. This is a big problem, as although Zeke did suggest the plan at first to gain a bit of trust and influence, he had no intentions of following it. So he now needed two things: time and control, both of which the Jaeger brothers would soon have, as many months ago Eren recruited Historia into this conspiracy as well, as she too wasn't so mad about this 50-year plan either. So Historia suddenly fell pregnant. This was a very smart move for two reasons. First of all, it convinces the government that the Queen is still cooperating with the 50-year plan, and secondly, it also buys Zeke a lot more time. Now Zeke and Eren needed control of the island and control of its military, as they would never be allowed to come into contact otherwise. So Yelena, who still had the trust of the Eldians, now began to conspire with the growing Jaegerist faction, a group of Eren's followers outraged at his untimely imprisonment. They commanded the volunteers working in every restaurant to serve the wine spiked with Zeke's spinal fluid, to military officers, to higher-ups, to government officials, getting more and more leverage one glass at a time. As once this plot was revealed to the Eldians, it was too late, as they were now all at the mercy of Zeke, under the threat of being transformed into pure titans at any given moment. Through the brute force of the Jaegerists and the destabilization of the military through the wine, Zeke and Eren now had full control. So after Zeke nearly gets cooked alive by Levi, a quick Marleyan invasion, and a headshot that almost ruins it all, Zeke and Eren finally come into contact, granting them the full power of the founding titan. Now finally, after all the plotting, all the deception, all the hardship, Zeke and Sober's plan of peace was finally within reach. Zeke would become the saint who saved the world. They would praise him till the end. Yeah, I'm not doing that. Eren Jaeger directly opposes the euthanasia plan, as he claims he was born into this world. He could never accept his race of people being sterilized and forced into extinction. There also might be a few problems with the euthanization plan that Zeke may have overlooked, as I don't think the Eldians will be particularly happy about their autonomy being removed, and will most definitely fight and rebel to get their ability to reproduce back. So I mean, after Zeke's 13-year term is up, there's nothing really stopping the future founding titan from just reverting these changes. Which moves us on to Eren's plan, the plan that Floch and his Jaegerist faction fought tooth and nail to keep alive. This was the plan to use the Founding Titan ability to activate a full-scale rumbling and trample all life and civilization outside the island, effectively destroying every possible threat to the Eldian race. After seeing his own future 4 years ago at the medal ceremony, Eren began trying to find ways to change the future he did not want to accept. However, as the years went on, he grew more and more frustrated with the options he had available to him. First off, he did not want to force Historia into inheriting the Beast Titan, and the Hizaru nation, who were actually supposed to be on their side, just struck a deal with Zeke to take advantage of Eldia's Iceburst Stone, and were only really in it for themselves the entire time. So because of this, Eren saw that he had no choice but to push towards the outcome he saw in the future, the only way to truly save the island and to allow his friends to live long lives. Pushing towards this result of a choice that Mikasa would make, which in the end was to kill Eren, freeing Ymir and bringing about the end of the power of the Titans, leading him to reveal the true intentions of his plans to Floch Forster, now a devout follower of his, asking him to cooperate and play along with Zeke and Yelena's plan, fully knowing they would later betray them anyway. Floch, now determined to carry out Eren's conspiracy, helped form a group of soldiers and military personnel who sympathized with Eren following his raid on Liberio, leaking information of his arrest to the public, causing outrage and protests. This group became known as the Jaegerists, with their main objective being to reform the Paradis military, placing Eren on top as its leader. Floch and his new Jaegerist faction began orchestrating a plot to overthrow the government from the shadows, assassinating Commander-in-Chief Darius Zackley and conspiring with Yelena to serve the military officials the spinal fluid-laced wine I mentioned earlier. So once this government was completely under their control, Floch coerced most of the soldiers into following his command. Once the rumbling began and Zeke had been betrayed, it was now time for the next stage of their plan, to maintain this full control of the island whilst Eren was away. Floch swiftly took command, getting the scouts to finish off the remaining pure titans in Shinganshina, arresting all the anti-Marleyan volunteers and carrying out public executions of anyone who wouldn't bend to his will. And when Mikasa and the scouts tried to steal the flying boat to stop Eren, even then the Jaegerists relentlessly fought to the death, showing their undying devotion to their ideology. They truly believe the only way to save Paradis is for Eren to become the devil of the island. Even after Eren's death, the Jaegerists were still going strong, building up the island's military to catch up with the other nations. They decided to merge the Survey Corps, the military police and the garrison into one single army, leaving the island balancing on the edge of fragile peace and full-scale war. So whilst this plan may have been one of the only true ways to crush all threats outside the island, it's still extremely messed up to eradicate everyone outside the walls, and still perpetuates the same cycle of hatred and violence. Also, thinking about it now, does it technically stop infighting on the island itself? Because I mean, do you really think a society built upon the blood of billions could properly function? I mean, Eren could maybe erase their memories of the whole event, but the thing is, the Titan powers will most certainly still be around as well, so the Eldians may very well find themselves in the same mindless war and conflict they found themselves in before, just this time with each other. So the rumbling plan doesn't address the true evil at the heart of this conflict, which is simply ignorance and violence. So let's take a quick look at a plan that does. Characters like Armin and Hanji saw things differently to everyone else. Instead of war plans, threats, and conspiracies, they instead sought after negotiations, treaties, and armistice. The hope of one day coming to a truce, sending out scouts over the years to try and reach other nations to come to a peaceful agreement for both sides. Eventually finding an ally in the Hizuru nation and hoping they use their influence to put in a good word with them with the other nations. A plan like this, which is although very naive in theory, would avoid the most casualties, open the island up to trade with other nations, and allow everyone to just live in peace. However, I think there's two huge roadblocks in the way of an understanding ever being reached. First of all, Marty's hatred of the Eldians is generational. They are told of their violent history and live in complete fear of their Titan abilities. Second, getting in contact with these other nations of the world, which probably hate Eldians just as much, if not more than Marley, would prove to be extremely difficult, because Marley on its own took the scouts years to infiltrate, and that was only possible with the help of Zeke and the volunteers, men on the inside. So if this Hizuru nation isn't really helping or cooperating, I'd say it would be very difficult for the island to even begin negotiations with other countries. So ultimately, this diplomacy plan did become a complete failure. Armin and Hanji simply weren't given enough time to try and reach a peaceful agreement, as with the threats of the rumbling or the raid on Liberio, the hatred and fear of the Eldians soon became justified for these other nations, making peaceful negotiations seem less and less likely of ever taking place. It also didn't help that the Hizuru nation, who were supposed to be helping them, kinda just screwed them over. So each plan here seems to just lead to disaster after disaster, completely ignoring the true cause of this entire conflict in the first place, which is simply ignorance and a lack of understanding. So I've chosen one plan out of these four that I think is Paradis' best hope for peace and safety in the long term. Now, many of you guys will disagree with me and have your own ideas, which is great, as that kind of is the entire point of the story itself. Attack on Titan isn't black and white. Out of all four of these plans, there is no true right answer. In this world, every character thinks they're the hero, but in reality, they're just a product of their time and upbringings. The story explores how they justify their choices when there's no definitive right answer. So the choice I'm going to justify today is Armin's diplomacy. And I know, it's got a highly likely chance of failure and is certainly the most idealistic and naive out of these four plans, as fighting to reach a peaceful agreement is near impossible in a conflict like this. But if Attack on Titan pushes one idea, it's that if something seems impossible, it doesn't mean it's not worth fighting for. And despite war and conflict seeming inevitable, we still shouldn't give up on humanity. I personally think the three plans of Euthanasia, the 50-year plan, and the rumbling address the issue more realistically, but I think they all just have too many flaws and are extremely messed up in practice. I'm not saying reaching a peaceful agreement is by any means easy in this situation, but I do think that violence will just beget more violence. So if given more time and proper help from the influential Hizuru nation, Paradis may have been able to reach an understanding, as even a character who hated the Eldians as much as Gabby even saw that the people of the island were no different to her in the end. But whilst this to me is the best option possible, with a story like Attack on Titan, there will never be a definite solution to this insane conflict. So what do you guys think of all this? Which plan is the right way to go for the people of the island? Be sure to let me know in the comments. I hope you guys really enjoyed today's breakdown, and be sure to like and subscribe, as the bigger the channel grows, I promise to make each video better and better. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I'll see you guys in the next video.